Welcome to Chapter 3, Managing Stress and Coping with Life's Challenges. Stress is a powerful influence in our lives and on our health. And the effects are really becoming more and more clear as the science of psychoneuroimmunology, PNI, unravels more of the secrets of just how greatly stress affects our immune system and therefore different diseases across our lifetime. It is my hope that after navigating this chapter, both through lecture and our in-class discussion, that you're left with more positive stress management skills that can help shift you towards greater health and happiness as we move forward. Being stressed takes a major toll on people at all ages and stages of life. And looking at this graph, I would suspect, while not reported, Gen Z is right on par with millennials, if not just a little bit higher. And so what we can deduce from this graph is that generations after boomers have even more elevated levels of stress due to environmental stressors, right? Things are changing in our world. And Richard Lazarus proposed that our reaction to stress is about the interaction between perception, coping ability, and the environment. So I don't want us to be too hard on ourselves because we have heightened levels of stress. Just recognize that there are more stressors that continue to surface. All right, so stress is a mental and physical response and adaptation by our bodies to real or perceived change and challenges. So it could be either real or perceived, how we perceive it. A stressor is a real or perceived physical, social, psychological event or stimulus that causes our bodies to react to stress. Several factors influence this. Not everybody experiences the same stressful, or what is stressful for one person is not stressful for everybody, right? So there's factors that contribute to that. And so it's either, or a combination of characteristics of the stressor, right? How big is the stressor? Biological factors, and past experiences. Those past experiences can either lead us to eliminate the stress or actually experience compounding stress. Stress can be tangible, meaning something that is like physically real and happening, like getting a failing grade on a test. Okay. Or it can be intangible, something we can't really put our finger on. It's an emotion, like the worry we have when we meet our significant other's parents. There's actually good stress, and it's a positive stress called eustress. And it may present the opportunity for personal growth and satisfaction that can actually improve health. So things like the stress about putting pressure on yourself to study for a test to get a good grade. Y'all have probably seen or heard about Bridezilla. So when people are getting ready for a big event, that eustress, there's excitement attached to it. And that eustress is creating that push to get things done and make things just right. A lot of people have this around the holidays and so forth. Distress. That's the negative stress, and it's caused by events that result in debilitative tension and strain. And there's several types of distress. Acute stress is the most common, and that comes from demands and pressures of the recent past and anticipated demands of the future, of the near future. So acute stress could be just college life in general. People putting pressure. What are you going to do after college? What are you majoring in college? What right? So it's acute because college doesn't last forever. So it's in the here and the now. Episodic acute stress occurs when regularly reacting with wild, acute stress about one thing or another. So it's happening in episodes, right? There's patterns to it. Chronic stress may not appear as intense, but can linger indefinitely or wreak massive havoc on your body systems. Traumatic stress is often the result of witnessing or experiencing events like major accidents, war, shootings, sexual violence, assaults, natural disasters. And there's one that they didn't put on there, and it's tertiary or secondary trauma stress. And so that is witnessing or experiencing stress through listening to someone's narrative about it. And so you are bearing witness to their story. Or it's even first responders experience it when they arrive at the scene of an accident, and they associate that whatever trauma has happened, they can relate to it. And so, or they just feel. And so some secondary trauma and stress can ensue. So when stress levels are low, our bodies are in homeostasis, balance, and it operates smoothly and it maintains equilibrium. Stressors trigger a crisis mode, physiological response, after which the body tries to return to homeostasis by means of adaptive response. The general adaptation syndrome has 3 phases, and that's alarm, resistance, and exhaustion. And so it's kind of a curve that comes up and then comes down. And on the downward slope, you'll notice that in the exhaustion stage, you go much lower than the normal state of resistance, or you much lower than homeostasis. When the body is exposed to a real or perceived stressor, the fight or flight response kicks in and triggers the autonomic nervous system response. The cerebral cortex triggers an autonomic nervous system response that prepares you for action. The autonomic nervous system controls the heart, glandular functions, and breathing. And there's 2 branches. The sympathetic nervous system, which gives you energy for the fight or flight by signaling the release of several stress hormones. One of the big ones is cortisol. And the parasympathetic nervous system functions to slow all the systems stimulated by the stress response. So sympathetic is going to send you up, and the parasympathetic is going to bring you back down. The hypothalamus functions as the control center of the sympathetic nervous system and determines the reactions for stress. It stimulates the adrenal glands to release epinephrine, otherwise known as adrenaline, and that causes more blood to be pumped with each heartbeat. Dilates airways in the lungs, increases breathing rate, stimulates the liver to release glucose, and dilates the pupils. Cortisol is a hormone that makes stored nutrients more readily available to meet energy demands. We need cortisol to meet the energy. And then endorphins are released to relieve pain. So here we can see this wonderful man is jumping out of an airplane, something that at one point in my life I thought was a good idea, and now that I'm older and wiser, remember my prefrontal cortex is a lot more on track, it's no longer a good idea for me to jump out of a perfectly good plane. But we can look at some of the acute stress responses that are going on. So in the brain, there's more blood flow to the brain to sharpen those senses in that moment. Hearing ability increases, perspiration increases, respiration rate increases. A lot of times they have noted that people under an acute stress response, people have demonstrated superhuman strength. So one example is someone's child being stuck under the car. There have been reports that a human lifted the car up to get the child out from under the car. So that's a part where stress can really kick in and be good. So some other things, our immune system activity decreases. So the more stressed you are, our immune system kind of takes a big hit. Salivation decreases and urine production decreases because our body is using all of the water. We're made mostly of water, and it's using that to really hit these other systems. It's like an alarm has gone off in the body, and we need that hydration to function in other areas. So there's a lot that happens in an acute stress response, physically and mentally. So during the resistance phase, the body makes an attempt to return to homeostasis, but because some perceived stressors still exist, the body does not achieve complete calm or rest. It stays activated, causing a higher metabolic rate in some organ tissues. We can run into some big problems. A prolonged response leads to allostatic load, or exhaustive wear and tear on the body. The physical and emotional energy used to fight a stressor has been depleted. Over time, cortisol can reduce immunocompetence, or the ability of the immune system to respond to attack, and its ability to protect you. So this is where we start seeing illnesses and disease come into play as a result of stress. So here's a list of some of the common symptoms of physical stress: tension headaches, migraine, dizziness, oily skin, blemishes, rashes, blushing, dry mouth. Remember, the body is using its own liquid to help with the stress. Jaw pain, grinding teeth, backache, stiff neck, muscle cramps, fatigue, tightness in the chest, hyperventilation, heart pounding or palpitations, stomach ache, acid stomach, burping, nausea, indigestion, those butterflies you feel in your stomach, that queasiness. There's also diarrhea, gassiness, constipation, increased urge to urinate. And then we have cold hands, sweaty hands and feet, hand tremors. This is just common. So eye twitching is another one. These are just some of the common symptoms. So we're going to look at some of the other effects. Stress is often described as a disease of prolonged arousal. So when our body is in this heightened state, it leads to a cascade of negative health effects. And stress and cardiovascular disease is a very, very strong correlation. And research shows the correlation between chronic stress and the impact on heart rate, blood pressure, and other cardiovascular diseases. The increased risk of CVD from chronic stress has been linked with arterial plaque buildup due to elevated cholesterol, hardening of the arteries, increases in inflammatory responses in the body. Some of those autoimmune diseases we hear a lot of. There's a correlation with that. Alterations in heart rhythm, increase in fluctuating blood pressure. Oh my gosh, it just goes on. Stress and weight gain. There's a higher stress levels. They may drive us towards food because they may increase cortisol levels in the bloodstream. So the cortisol seems to play a role in increased belly fat and increased eating behaviors. Cortisol is great in an emergency situation, but too much of it can truly wreak havoc in the body. Too much stress can lead to thinning hair and even baldness in both men and women. Controlling stress is critical for preventing weight gain and other risk factors for type 2 diabetes, as well as short and long-term diabetic management. Stress can trigger nausea, vomiting, stomach cramps, and other gut pain. Some relaxation techniques are particularly helpful in coping with stressors that make digestive problems worse. Psychoneuroimmunology analyzes the relationship between the mind's response and the ability of the immune system to function effectively. Too much stress over a long period can negatively affect various aspects of the cellular immune response. So, stress can cause illness. Now, on the flip side, I believe that if stress can cause illness, that our mind is powerful enough to create wellness as well. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Research indicates that 56% of college students felt overwhelmed with all that they had to do within the past 2 weeks. Stress can play a huge role in whether students complete school, get good grades, and succeed on their career path. Animal studies provide compelling indicators of how stress hormones released from the adrenal cortex are believed to affect cognitive function and overall mental health. Recent lab studies with rats have linked prolonged exposure to cortisol to actual shrinking of the hippocampus, the brain's major memory center. Stress may be one of the single greatest contributors of mental disability and emotional dysfunction in industrialized nations. Believe it or not, they don't have stress in every part of the world. Studies have shown that chronic stress may cause structural degeneration and impaired function of the brain, leading to depression, dementia, and Alzheimer's disease, as well as an overactive amygdala, which may increase rates of violence. College students face grade pressure, stress from finding housing, becoming financially independent, career choices in employment, relationships, and family. It's just never ending. The stress is all around us. We're going to take a minute to watch this video on the damage that stress can have on women's health.
And a health alert now about stress and women. A study just released by the Families and Work Institute confirms what a lot of women already knew. There is not enough time to balance family, home, work, and obligations. And new research tonight shows how all that stress can ruin your health, and a simple test could save your life. Here's ABC's Claire Shipman.
Emily Bushler thought life at warp speed, that clock that never seems to stop, was just life.
Responding to emails, trying to meet these crazy deadlines so that I could then get home to pick up my kids and to get dinner on the table.
Stress, fatigue, and in addition, weight gain, especially belly fat, are more than just a modern annoyance. They can be life-threatening symptoms of a serious cortisol disorder.
It increases a woman's risk for developing diabetes, risk of heart disease, thinning of the bones, cognitive impairment, and depression.
The culprit is cortisol. Like adrenaline, cortisol charges out of our adrenal glands in times of stress. But constant stress sends cortisol coursing through our systems at all hours. The potent hormone is suddenly an internal enemy, creating fat, making too much sugar, and sending it to the wrong places. One new study found that people with high cortisol are 58% more likely to develop heart disease. Another found women are more susceptible than men. A few years ago, with a demanding career and kids, I was like Emily. But a routine hormone check, a saliva test similar to the one she took, gave me a shock. The solution's straightforward but tough. Enough sleep, regular exercise, everyday activities to de-stress, yoga, meditation, an hour with a good book. I started working out like Lori Fisher did, who was also motivated by the test.
Before that, I felt guilty trying to set time aside for me.
But really, you may not need the test. Think of the new research on cortisol as a prescription to do the obvious. Slow down. Claire Shipman, ABC News, Washington.
Slowing down is so important. It's actually critical to reducing the impacts of stress. Our society, it glorifies exhaustion, right? People say all the time, oh my gosh, I worked 80 hours this week. Somebody else says, oh my gosh, I worked 90 hours this week. That's nothing to be proud of. I want to hear, how relaxed are you? How well rested are you? How much joy are you experiencing in life? We're meant to live, not endure, while we're here. Appraisal is defined as the interpretation and evaluation of information provided to the brain by the senses. Individual factors that affect your stress response: appraisal and stress, self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. High stress and low self-esteem can significantly predict suicidal ideation in young adults. You can improve your ability to cope with stress by increasing your self-esteem. Sounds super easy, right? But that's typically work that needs to happen on your mental well-being, your physical well-being, your spiritual well-being. Our self-efficacy refers to confidence in skills and abilities to cope with life's changes. High self-efficacy predicts a number of health behaviors in college students, and developing self-efficacy is vital for coping with and overcoming academic pressures. College students thrive under a certain amount of stress, but excessive stress can overwhelm anyone. You can't eliminate all stressors in life, but you can train yourself to recognize the events that cause stress and to anticipate your reactions to them. Coping is the act of managing events or conditions to lessen the physical or psychological effects of excess stress. A lot of what we've talked about in our class, I try and begin with mindfulness. And it really is beneficial because stress management requires getting a handle on what is going on in your life, taking a careful look at yourself and developing a plan of action. Assess your stressors to solve problems mindfully. Use compassion in your thinking and internal conversations. Be kind to yourself. Remember, you haven't done this day before. We're doing this for the first time. Be kind to yourself. Examine the causes. Change your inner voice. Several types of negative self-talk exist: pessimism, perfectionism, shoulding, blaming. We want to shift away from that and become more mindful and more compassionate. It's really important to develop a social network. Find supportive people. Invest in your loved ones. While developing a stress management program, do not underestimate the importance of social networking. We're not meant to do life alone, and we are so much better together. I guarantee you, if there is something that is stressing you out, there is somebody else in this world that has experienced stress. Maybe not exactly the same, but they've felt stress and they can help you through it. Cultivating your spiritual side. It's finding your purpose in life, living days more fully. Remember those gratitudes I talked about? Glad that we did as role last week. That is really helping to cultivate some spirituality, and being mindful and being in the moment and recognizing what we have done as a human good that day. One of the most important factors in reducing stress in your life is taking the time and making that commitment to yourself and your spirituality. Finding purpose. Purpose and passion is very important in life. Stress management requires that you examine your emotional responses to interactions with others. Fight the anger urge. Identify your anger style. Learn to recognize patterns in your anger responses and how to de-escalate them. I tend to characterize anger more as a reaction. When we respond, we're bringing in more mindful thought, and anger is just kind of happens. Anger is not a bad emotion, but we need to navigate it carefully and with compassion. Learn to laugh. Be joyful, cry. I have a friend of mine that teaches laugh yoga, and it's actually very bizarre, but kind of fun at the same time. Take physical action. We're going to talk so much more about this in another chapter. Getting enough sleep. Sleep is imperative to reducing stress. Practicing self-nurturing. Taking care of yourself and loving yourself. The longest relationship you're going to have with anybody in your entire life is a relationship that you have with yourself. You better start liking you, because you're kind of stuck with yourself. And eating healthfully, what we put into our body, our input has a direct correlation to our output. Managing time. Now, some of you have put that as a behavior goal that you wanted to work on. So it's really essential for stress management, is managing time. Procrastination is defined as a voluntary delay in doing some type of task despite expecting to be worse off for the delay. We're all guilty of it at some point in our lives, right? We are so relieved when the task is done that it's kind of like, gosh, why didn't I just tackle it in the first place? Setting clear implementation intentions, a series of goals to accomplish towards a specific end, helps with time management. It is also really helpful to take on one thing at a time. For some people, that is much more difficult than others, but cleaning off your desk, prioritizing your tasks, finding a clean, comfortable place to work. I am the queen of to-do lists and post-it notes all over the place. I have them I'm post-its everywhere to help me manage time and stay a little bit more organized. And consider downshifting. Take a step back and simplify your life. Learn to say no and mean it. I read something that most things work if you shut them off and turn them back on, including you. So that goes back to that, let's slow down, right? It's not a race to the finish. We all have one destination, and I'm not really in a hurry to get there. Move slowly. Have a plan when contemplating any type of downshifting. Take gentle care of yourself. Relax. Some relaxation techniques for stress management. Yoga combines meditation, stretching, and breathing exercises. Qigong involves becoming aware of and controlling your qi or your vital energy. Tai Chi is meditation in motion, and diaphragmic breathing. Any one of these is beneficial because it is a mindful exercise, each one of those. Meditation is a relaxation technique that involves deep breathing and concentration. Visualization is the creation of mental images to promote relaxation. And then there's progressive muscle relaxation. Easy for me to say. And so a couple of these things we're going to work on in class. We're going to look at some progressive muscle relaxation. We're going to look at some diaphragmic breathing and see if we can bring some stress relief to class. So a couple of other relaxation techniques are massage therapy. It's beneficial for blood pressure and inflammation in the body. And biofeedback. It's a relatively new-ish technique. It uses machines to self-monitor physical responses to stress. So if anybody has one of those breathe apps where something gets bigger and then it gets smaller and then as checking your heart rate as it goes. That's biofeedback, right? Because you're able to see the effect on your blood pressure or your heart rate as that's happening. So there are others that monitor the effects in the brain as well. I hope this has been of benefit to you. We're going to talk more about stress management. I want you guys to think about what is stressful for you, and let's have a really good conversation in class on Thursday and see what we can do about bringing in some relaxation techniques into our life. I will see you on Thursday. Be well.